Hey everybody, and welcome to this terrain talk where I'm going to go through how I went about building some of the parts for my Vault 111 theme board. These videos are going to look at different terrain builds and how I do them. This one, I'm going to look at all the stuff I made for the Undiscovered Vault. It's the first Fallout Friday scenario from Modiphius. You can check out the battle report for that video here. So for the Undiscovered Vault, I decided to make some terrain pieces from the Vault 111 entrance area in Fallout 4. I started by just making a bit of a rough roadmap and thinking about the different terrain pieces I wanted to make. There was definitely going to be a lot involved in this, easily my biggest build to date, and basically 4 different projects. The most difficult one was, of course, going to be the most iconic, and that was going to be the vault elevator entrance. This was going to be a tricky thing to get going. I had a couple different ideas. Looking at files from the game and online, I noticed that there were 2 sort of variations of this. First, the pre-apocalypse version and the post-apocalypse version. In the beginning part of the game, it's all quite bright and the colors very vivid, but when you wake up and actually exit the vault, it looks a lot like this. So a lot of concrete showing through, a lot of rust, and a lot of those colors have really been dulled and muted by time and grime. I threw around a couple ideas on how to actually build the elevator entrance, and going through an old closet, and I found the stack of paper plates, which worked out damn near perfectly. It gave me at least a shell to work with, and then I could build and add some bits and bobs on top of it to give it some definition and some more character. Using some old 40K blast markers was a perfect way to sort of give that 2-tiered entrance and start to build the gear mechanism. And by cutting out chunks of the curved part of the plate and then just inverting them and gluing them in from the underside, sort of started to simulate those notched out, vented sort of areas that you see in the actual game. I took a second plate and then just started cutting big, large void areas of it out. Then glued those down to the main base plate. I gave everything a spray of a primer, but before that, to not eat through the styrofoam, I gave everything a very, very, very light dusting with a spray can of spray adhesive. This was sort of a double-edged sword because I didn't want to put too much on there to eat through the styrofoam, but also wanted to put enough on there that it sort of gave that pockmarked concrete sort of look and made it easier to prime, and so the aerosol in the primer didn't also eat through the plate. It was very ginger getting this done, but we got it done. For the cogs of the gears, I actually used just some sticky tack putty. Cut that off with a scalpel to size, made 12 different ones, and glued them down to the edge of the blast markers to give myself my vault entrance gear. Not too shabby. I also gave those raised metal parts, or the parts I want to look like raised metal, a layer of dark blue. This was all just craft store acrylic, nothing too fancy. To start getting that weathered look, I just used a very watered down lighter blue and gave that bit of a brush all over some of those raised areas on the blast markers, as well as my raised metal blue areas and those vents on the inside. I used a very watered down black acrylic to start going in and giving a bit of the concrete textures, just stippled that into some of the areas to try to give some definition of that weathered concrete. I gave the whole thing a wash in black and then went in with orange, black, and brown, very watered down to start getting these rusty details. Then I just went through and pulled out some of the spots where things got messy and did some additional highlights along those raised metal edges, the blue parts, as well as gave the yellow cog another wash and then another bit of highlight to sort of change up the way it looked. I then took some wooden dowels, which I'll use later on for the fences I'm going to make, cut those to make those little yellow nubs you see on the side of that vent there. I knocked out a base, coated it in PVA glue mixed with brown paint, and then stuck some grit and rocks around there. Kitty litter here is actually my go-to. I have a cat, I have kitty litter, I have terrain. Boom, problem solved. Painted the rocks with some Eshin gray and then a light gray overcoat. Then used some dollar store preserved moss, giant bag for $2, to get a little bit of tufts and some flocking on there as well. And that pretty much calls it a day for the vault entrance. Easier said than done. There's still a couple spots that, had I wish I had more time, I would have done some more fine tuning to, especially sanding the edges of the base. But all in all, I'm really happy with how this worked out. Really complicated piece in my head, but came together fairly simply overall. Next up, it was time to tackle the Vaulttec billboard. This was probably the easiest piece of the whole board to put together, mainly because I'd already done some of the legwork and had built this Nuka-Cola billboard the week prior. The cylinder of the billboard was actually made out of 2 halves of a semicircular strip of foam. I just cut it to size and then glued a popsicle stick in the middle to give it some rigidity and support. For the base, I used a dollar store wooden craft disc that I found, a pack of these for about $1.50. It's pretty good steel. I coated the whole thing in some watered down PVA, added some of that kitty litter, and then covered the whole thing with a mixture of PVA and brown paint as per usual. A couple of foam bricks painted with some black wash sort of added a little bit of texture and also some line of sight breaking terrain. After that, it was as simple as cutting some MDF to size and then just gluing the photograph on there. Pretty simple stuff. I'll attach a link for that file down in the description below. I used a knife to chip away some of the edges of the billboard just to add some of that weathered sort of look. Some units with larger bases are going to have a little bit of a tough time if they want to actually, go up on top of that banister, but for all intents and purposes, this is going to get the job done for what I need. For the Porta Shack, I was really sort of scratching my head at first. I thought of maybe doing strips of cardboard, maybe some foam board, maybe some MDF, and then I found this. At my local corner store, they sell all kinds of candies and things like that in these plastic tubs, and with, a little stretch of the imagination, it looks a lot like the Porta Shack. Now, all the curves aren't quite the same, and, there's some different parts here and there, but I thought this was going to come pretty damn close to doing what I needed it to do without being a whole complicated build. I like to try to repurpose stuff whenever possible. Everything got a quick hit with that spray adhesive to bring out some sort of texture-y bits that I can paint on top of, and then I hit it with the primer. After that, it was just some acrylic white, some blue, and some rust using some browns, blacks, and oranges to sort of mix together, little runny effect. Using this tub also gave me a roof that I could take off and use the interior of the Porta Shack, which is exactly what I wanted to do for this scenario. Have one of these little computers that I built in here as well, and that's going to work as an objective marker. I used a bottle cap and hot glued it to the bottom of the building to act as the sort of support strut, and for the ramp I just used a piece of foam board cut out to be about the same size as the doorway that I cut out as well. Kicked out the base in the exact same way that I've done the last ones, and just using foam board for this as well. Of course, it wouldn't be a Vaulttec structure without some Vaulttec propaganda, so I found these small posters. You can find these online. I'll put a link to those as well. Cut these out and just a little bit of PVA glue just to get them onto the sides of the building, and also put some on the inside as well. While not a build, I thought I'd just quickly touch on what I did for the crates and the sort of forklift piece of machinery that's on the map. The crates were super easy because I already had them. I just gave them a quick Fallout paint job. They were black before, so just some light blue and some metallic gold around the edges to give it sort of that Fallout-y look. While poking around the dollar store, I found this off-brand Tonka truck front-end loader thing. I couldn't find an actual toy forklift, so this got the job done. It was yellow, so I just gave it a quick nasty paint job with oranges, browns, and blacks, and a little bit of metallic as well. The fences were a ton of fun and actually pretty simple. I just used some dowels, again from the dollar store, a little bit of hot glue on a base made out of foam board. For the actual chain link in the fence, I just recycled the bag that the toy Tonka truck came in. Total happy accident there, but it worked perfectly. I just weaved that mesh through the dowels. I just secured it with some hot glue, and then I sprayed the entire unit with that spray adhesive again. After priming the fences, of which I made 4 at different lengths, I then coated the whole thing in some metallic, added in some browns for some rust, based them in exactly the same way as I did all the other buildings, and on one of them I threw up one of these hard work is happy work posters as well. The computers were a little bit tedious to put together, but not all that difficult. I just took 3 small pieces of foam board, glued them together in a bit of a rectangle. Then I just took a piece of cereal box cardboard, folded that in half, and glued that underneath to make the sort of keyboard tray. Covered the whole thing in a small strip of foam. We just got that at a craft store. It was a large sheet by about 2 feet by about 3 feet. Painted the outsides of it gray and the screen black. The power poles were a bit of an afterthought, but I wanted to use something more scenic and thematic for the investigation markers, which the super mutants were going to be looking for in the scenario. After doing some browsing on YouTube, I came across this build in a video by RFD Hobby. Go check them out, check out the video. He does a way better job of these than I did. I just kind of knocked them together quick. Something else to add to the board, really. Throw in some battle systems, scatter terrain, and a couple other pieces that I already had, including some foam rocks and that sort of thing. And there you have it, my Vault 111 theme board. You know, I'm no professional at this. This is all just a hobby and something I really like to do and something to do during lockdown. But I'm pretty proud of all of these pieces. Sure, had I had more time and, more energy, I probably would have done a little bit of a better job. But all in all, I'm pretty stoked on all of these pieces. Well, I hope you enjoyed taking a look at how I put my board together and maybe give you some ideas for some builds of your own down the road. Let me know what you think of these pieces and let me know if there's anything you might like to see me tackle. I'm going to be doing some more terrain as Fallout Fridays continue, and I'm also going to do a couple pieces to tie in with some Modifius releases as they're coming down the line. And if you haven't watched my battle report on the Undiscovered Vault, please check that out as well. It was a good time. That AI system in this game is pretty brutal. You never know what's going to happen. So without any spoilers, go check that out and let me know what you think of that as well.